Erin Elizabeth Ann Strotman, a former neonatal intensive care unit nurse at Henrico Doctors Hospital in Henrico County, Virginia, who was accused of injuring multiple newborns while they were in her care. Prosecutors ultimately linked Strotman to the injuries. Reporting has varied slightly as the investigation expanded, but the most widely reported figure at the time of her plea was 9 infants whose cases were folded into the resolution, with earlier reporting describing as many as 7 infants in initial allegations and indictments that later covered incidents from 2022 through 2024. Those infants' injuries included multiple bone fractures, unexplained bruising, and other trauma inconsistent with their clinical status, which neonatologists and child abuse pediatricians concluded were not plausibly explained by the baby's underlying medical conditions. The hospital's response and timeline became central to the story. Henrico Doctors Hospital and its parent health system have been criticized in reporting and by investigators for delays and lapses in how the suspicious injuries were documented and reported to authorities. Some articles noted that the hospital only installed or activated more robust surveillance in the NICU after earlier unexplained injuries occurred, and that new footage later captured concerning handling of an infant. That surveillance footage, described by prosecutors and reported in local press, became a key piece of the investigation because it allegedly showed Strotman using handling techniques that resulted in immediate injury to a baby, and that evidence helped expand criminal charges and push the prosecutor to file more counts. Family members and attorneys for the Commonwealth pointed to the footage and to the statistical clustering of similar injuries as strongly suggestive of intentional or reckless mistreatment rather than random medical complications. Criminally, Strotman was arrested in early 2025 after authorities charged her with a set of offenses that included malicious wounding, felony child abuse, and related counts as the probe widened. The number and nature of the charges evolved as prosecutors added cases and as the grand jury returned indictments covering incidents across multiple years. She was initially held on bond and released pending prosecution. Her nursing license was suspended as regulatory and criminal processes moved forward. Court filings and news reports also mentioned that Strotman had been placed on administrative leave at times, and that there were text messages and other records reviewed by investigators during the inquiry that prosecutors examined for context about her state of mind and behavior while employed in the NICU. In January 2026, Strotman entered a plea of no contest to a set of felony child abuse charges. Reporting around the plea indicates the negotiated resolution reduced the originally more numerous or more serious counts in exchange for her not contesting a defined number of felony convictions. The plea agreement, as described by prosecutors and reported in multiple outlets, capped the state's recommended prison exposure at up to 3 years and included terms that would bar her from ever working as a nurse or with children again. Sentencing was scheduled for June 5, 2026. Prosecutors and the Commonwealth's attorney framed the plea as ensuring accountability while avoiding the uncertainties of a jury trial, and families of the victims were reported as having participated in the disposition process and having reached agreement on the resolution. As for the victims themselves, reporting has been careful not to identify infants by full names beyond what parents voluntarily shared. The publicly reported portraits focus on parents' accounts of otherwise healthy newborns who developed unexplained fractures or bruises while under hospital care, the emotional trauma to families, and the clinical detective work, repeat imaging, specialist consults, and multidisciplinary reviews that led clinicians to suspect non-accidental injury. Some parents described healthy babies who later were diagnosed with a fractured tibia or other long bone fractures. Clinicians testified in interviews that the pattern, timing, and similarity across multiple infants raised alarm because such fractures are rare in that NICU population absent significant external force. Medical experts consulted by the press described the injuries as serious but survivable and emphasized that long-term outcome depends on the specific injury and treatment. Parents reported lasting emotional anguish and concern about trust in the hospital system. During the investigative and pretrial phases, key items of evidence cited publicly included the NICU surveillance videos, the medical records documenting the injuries, radiological imaging, expert opinions from pediatric radiologists and child abuse pediatricians, personnel records and shift logs showing who had custody of particular infants at specific times, and internal hospital communications about when injuries were noticed and how they were, or were not, escalated. Investigators and prosecutors described how the clustering of similar injuries across different infants and different dates, combined with the surveillance footage showing allegedly improper handling, allowed them to tie specific injuries to shifts when Strotman was present. Defense coverage and reporting emphasized that intent is legally distinct from causing injury and that the plea avoided a jury deciding disputed issues, though the plea itself is an admission-like disposition that results in criminal convictions for the counts pleaded. The hospital and health system responses also became a focal point. News accounts reported that Henrico Doctors Hospital implemented changes after the investigation, and the state investigation noted systemic lapses, including how suspicious injuries were documented and how the hospital reported concerns to Child Protective Services and law enforcement. Those administrative findings and policy changes have been highlighted in coverage about institutional accountability and about how hospitals detect and respond to potential abuse in high-acuity units like NICUs. Families and community members pushed for transparency and for changes to prevent recurrence. The Commonwealth's attorney publicly urged better procedures while stressing the need for prosecutorial accountability in cases involving vulnerable patients. There are limits to what is publicly available. Many court documents, internal personnel files, and detailed victim medical records are either sealed, redacted to protect minors, or not released to the press. Thus, while contemporary news reporting, official statements, and the plea disposition provide a strong public narrative about what prosecutors proved and what defendants accepted, the full evidentiary record that would be available at a contested trial is not all in the public domain.